All right, everybody, welcome back. We're doing a really fun and different kind of video today. I'd sort of hinted at it for that last tier list video that I was going to be working with Karma. And we've gotten to just kind of talk on and offline about decks and different planeswalkers. And, they had the idea that it'd be fun to pick a planeswalker that maybe we don't have as much experience with, like either of us. And I thought that would be kind of an interesting point to look at how we both deck build. So thanks for suggesting this and just being involved in the whole process, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be awesome working with you, and I hope everyone enjoys the video.
Heck yeah, this is gonna be some cool stuff because we really haven't done something like this. So yeah, I guess we'll kind of dive in. I'll throw it to you here. I mean, like how have you generally? I know you haven't done a ton of Nahiri. I've played a little bit of some of my teammates' decks recently, but not much. Like, what are your thoughts on Nahiri from what you've seen?
Well, I mean, from what I've seen, like going against her,
Yeah.
it it seems pretty close to what Kaya does, but you've got your extra sword as a weapon to boost your creatures. Um, like I said, I mean, I'm fairly new at her. I tried making a deck and had a little bit of success,
hmm
but not a whole bunch of success.
Yeah, that's pretty similar to me, actually. Like, I agree with the point about, kind of playing like Kaya with some evasive creatures or that just typical aggressive play style. And I, I feel like there have been a lot of different ways to build her. Even just looking at these lands right now, I've played with a little bit of Moorland Haunt. I think I've seen people play with Molten Monastery. And then the one that I feel like makes the most sense at the moment, and the one I've seen the most is going to be Emberspawn Crags. Um, but it's interesting. I feel like you can kind of build her in lots of different ways. Like I think people built her control too, which was pretty crazy when like the Devil deck was like more popular. I don't know if you ever saw that, but
I I didn't personally, but it would have been interesting to see. I,
yeah,
I've 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 seen more Nahiri now than I've ever seen in the past, to be honest.
and to clue the viewers into why we ended up talking about it is I had seen her a lot too, and in the tier list video I put her as kind of the breakout aggro deck, which I think she just really benefited. Matt and I were talking about that earlier from Barbarian being buffed. Um, Specifically, the second card, right, comes down to turns sooner instead of 3 mana. It's two, and just some of the other decks that kind of pushed aggro out got nerfed. So I have not seen as much Teferi. I'm seeing a lot of green mid range from where I've been
I'm
playing.
I'm seeing a lot of Nissa,
A lot of Nissa, yep. I,
a
w-
lot of Nissa.
I played probably like 10 Nissa games today before we started this because she does feel pretty good. But I do think that actually Nahiri has ways of having a favorable matchup into that deck. So that's kind of interesting for us to start. But I guess Matt, for you, I think what have you felt has been like one of the best lands to play for this kind of deck?
Um, to me, the one that would make most sense would be the Crags, the Emberspawn Crags.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, I can see why Moreland Hunt would work. I mean, it gives you a flyer.
mm-hmm.
The- It's always good to have things in the air. But to me, the thing that makes the most sense would be probably the Emberspawn Crags.
Yep, I'm with you there. I've actually just really come off Moorland Haunt the more and more I've kind of played with it. I think sometimes it does it just doesn't do enough for you when it hits. Whereas I think Crags, every time I've played against any deck, but I would say specifically Nahiri and Angrath that are running Crags, when that thing hits on turn 5 or 6, it really changes your ability to stabilize when you're playing against those sorts of aggressive decks. And like you said earlier, Matt, too, the having the Nahiri sword, right, where it makes these Crags into 4/1s, right, and we'll talk about, I think, Barbarian Class too, but there's some really noticeable synergy, I think, with Crags. So I'm definitely on the same page there.
I 100% agree. The Crags very much complement the aggro decks pretty well.
Yeah,
Being hasty creatures.
yeah, I'm always just like praying, even when I've been playing Domri, which I think does okay, or like somewhat favorable into some of the aggro decks. It sometimes those turns can be really, really backbreaking when you hit them. So, how do you feel about her signature cards?
um, I love them, all three of them. They work very well with her. um, so like the recruit, obviously, very powerful card. It's got armor, it's got haste. To me, that's crazy powerful.
Yep. Just a really good rate for that creature, and the combination of armor haste when you're giving it +2/+0 for 1 mana, right? Like at kind of at worst with your passive ability with the Stoneforge Blade is just, really nice, really cheap creature that's effective.
Yes. And then, Outburst is a very good card, to get rid of a creature that might be in your way.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think the only thing worth noting with Nahiri's Outburst is you do have to have the blade on a creature, so to deal the damage. So it
right.
kind of has a hidden cost of 3 mana, not 2 mana, but I agree with you. I think it's still very impactful because almost always you're dealing 4 damage for 3 mana, which is basically right like a flame coil. Um,
Right.
so I think that is really good when you're trying to push damage as well.
And then, Willful Smith, it speaks for itself. It's just powering up your blade to be even more powerful, potentially getting it to +4, +0 for 1 mana.
Will Smith, yes. Um, I think that it's really interesting that Nahiri used to be her passive only gave +1/+0, and Smith I think was really really important to get rolling because +2/+0 is just so much better, and when you can give +3 now because Nahiri's passive is +2/+0, yeah, I mean you just turn in any creature into like a serious threat, which
Yeah,
is really really effective. So
very good for taking out other creatures,
yeah.
or even like, I know we haven't gotten to Barbarian Class yet, but I know we're going to be getting to it,
Oh
and
yeah.
I feel like you will agree with me. Just the blade and the last part of this, doing 5 damage to your opponent attacking with a creature with 5 or more power. You drop that the Willful Smith,
Smith. Yeah.
and you pretty much can get any creature to 5. You do that, you attack 4 times in a game, and you've already done 20 damage.
Yeah. This card, it's so funny. I feel like a lot of factors came together, whether it was like this patch and just kind of how, certain decks have fallen out of favor and stuff like that. Where Barbarian Class like is genuinely a really impactful card for red aggressive decks. I
Right, and
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
even the artifact, though, like, it gives you +1/+0. I know a lot of people want to use that in the early game, but if you think about it, if you wait to use it, unless you have to, until late game, or later in the game when you can play the indomitable strength, you can use that to get your 4-power creature to 5-power, and then now you just attack with that creature and you're doing the 5 damage to your opponent. It's lethal.
Yep, exactly. I think that's the thing that sort of tip is just really, really important for playing with Barbarian Class, because it can be tempting, because Axe of Vengeance is so cheap, to like just be playing your little 1-drops and 2-drops and just trying to push damage. But like you said, being able to guarantee the lava axe off of Indomitable Strength in the later stages of the game is the kind of reach that most red decks need to close out the games. And you can, like you said, you can almost guarantee it. I mean, just with a Emberspawn Crag, having one of the spawns in your hand, your blade plus that, right, and you've got a 5/1 haster coming in. There's just not much. Your opponent can't interact with haste creatures for the most part unless they have certain traps. So,
right, you got it. I mean, and potentially if they don't have a way to block that creature, now you're doing 10 damage in 1 turn.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about.
One,
Go ahead.
with 1 creature, right?
Exactly, and we're going to talk about a haste creature that, a lot of times has been just such a game changer, but it has another keyword on it, which we'll get to later. That almost always, I feel like, can get in for 10.
So I think we agree with the first 7 cards that we're putting in this deck
100%.
Are the 3 signatures and the Barbarian.
Absolutely. Got your first 7 cards right there. Easy peasy.
Okay. So are we? Well, obviously it's gonna be white and red. So the next card. Is there any that you see that you would want in these 6?
So I think for what we're doing, probably not. Thraben Sentry, obviously very good in like sort of the Paragon style strategies. Filigree Fox being a 1-mana 2/2 is totally serviceable, especially if you're just starting out playing the game. For aggressive decks, it is just like a fine rate. But yeah, I think we're looking for a little bit more bang for our buck out of our 1 or 2 drops.
So here, I really like this card. In any deck that's got white, this card giving +1/+1 to 3 different creatures is crazy to me. With just for a 1 cost.
Yeah, I mean, you know how I feel about Invoke the Dawn for at least a Johnny and Kaya, because it can really synergize. And I do think that one of the hardest parts of building Nahiri is, and it's kind of similar to Kaya, where you're like, okay, how dense do I need to go on creatures, and what slots do I need to devote to spells? And I think Invoke the Dawn is one that I often think about, because, like you said, it spreads out the +3/+3 to 3 creatures essentially, and sometimes the weakness of these aggro decks is that they don't quite have enough power or quite enough toughness to keep kind of plugging away. And especially when you have evasive creatures, which I know we've talked about, it can really do a lot more than it seems for 1 mana. So I feel like it makes sense to include for now. I mean, if we really feel like we need maybe 2 free spots for other creatures, but I think it can be quite helpful in this kind of strategy. Yeah.
Okay. Um, Daughter of Runes is good for giving armor to creatures, but I do not like that she's only a 1/2. And she doesn't have like anything special going for her other than, the giving the armor to the other creature that might not necessarily need it.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting tension because giving armor to your creatures that can have high power obviously is good, right? Because you're just almost always going to be trading your armor up for whatever creature is blocking, and it allows you to essentially two for one. But also I think it's important what you brought up, Matt. Of okay, if it was a 1/2 flyer, right? That would obviously be strictly better because also it's got a little bit of evasion. You can make it into a 3/2 with the blade, but the kind of floor with this card, right, of just giving kind of a random creature armor that might not be that impactful, and having a 1/2 or at best a 3/2 body after you give it the blade left over. I I go back and forth. I think it's more of a metagame call. I think armor is always more impactful when you're playing against aggressive decks because it's, a 1/2 for one is cheap. You throw the armor on, your creatures are trading for their creatures, you're able to get card advantage through that. Um, but I don't know that it's going to do enough against like Nissa, Vraska, some of these other cards that don't really care about armor. That's kind of been so I feel like we're sort of on the same page there.
Yeah. So now, do we want we? I'm thinking we do want to include some flyers in this deck.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Tell me your
I don't
thoughts.
know.
Tell me your thoughts.
Lingering Spirits, right? It's got flying. It's a 1/1 and potentially can be boosted by your blade.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But how do you feel about putting that in the deck, or just not putting it in the deck and putting the Gryff in the deck instead, being a little bit more healthy?
Yeah, I think it can be close. Like I think Lingering Spirit is like pretty serviceable, in this style of deck, right? It's like you play it turn one, you set it up turn two, it's attacking as a 3/1 flyer. Um, and the flying, permanently just in decks like this I don't think matters too much. So when we look at Fledgling Gryff, right, like the drawback is it doesn't have flying on your opponent's turn, but again, you're not like hyper concerned with blocking. I am pretty partial to Gryff. I really like it just because it feels a lot of the time strictly better than Lingering Spirit. Um, so I think I follow your logic there. And a card that I'm a little bit split on here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, Matt, is Elite Vanguard. Because there's one point I think in this deck for it, but I'm wondering how you feel about it.
So Elite Vanguard would be great with the Indomitable Strength, right?
Yep.
So like later on in the game, you can drop her. She's a decent block. She is, but I feel like there's probably a better creature overall than her in the deck. I don't like that she's only got 1 health.
Yeah, I feel that. I think Gryff is like probably the easiest kind of flyer, like low curve flyer to put in for now. I mean, I do think it's close between Spirit and Vanguard. Like you're making a trade off, right? That you're saying, okay, I'd rather have an evasive creature that does a little bit less damage or would be a little bit harder to get Indomitable strength off. Or I take Elite Vanguard and say, okay, I don't really care that it's not evasive. It's just a creature that I know guaranteed I can play the Vanguard, put the blade on, and that's going to be 5 power. Um, I'm still not particularly like sold on Vanguard overall because I think it does depend on what you think is more effective for closing out the game. Like, would you rather be pecking away in the air, or do you think you have enough early pressure so that a Vanguard not connecting but getting through for 5 with Indomitable Strength is good enough? So I think we can come back to it and see if that makes sense to have a slot.
Yeah. So you're thinking about spirits being a flyer might be better than Vanguard because she's just a body on the floor, right?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like a, again, your these sorts of decisions come down to what matchups are we kind of trying to account for. Vanguard would be better in sort of slower metas, I think, right? Because it might be able to punish not having an early blocker. If you have it early or later on, it might trade up for something. I I, I think Vanguard has a little bit more upside than Lingering Spirit, but I think it's close. That's kind of where I'm at with that.
It is. Uh,
Cool.
I know different people would think, if you're in the air and they don't have anybody to block, now you poke them for 3 turns and you've done as much as she would, the Vanguard would in
Right.
1 turn.
Right.
But she's on the ground, so she's going to get blocked and potentially killed right off.
Yeah.
She's very easy to kill with 1 health.
Definitely. Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, if we have, I think if we end up with other cards in the deck that allow maybe a little bit more of a chance for her to connect as an on the ground creature, stuff that makes their creatures not able to block, I could see her being better than Lingering Spirit, but I'm not sure that that's. We'll see, I think, how things shake out with the build.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
So, what are your thoughts on? Obviously, we don't want healer's kit, but what are your thoughts on beginner's luck or champion's grit?
So, I think, kind of, without too much setup, Champion's Grit can be, pretty reasonable, because it is very cheap, right? You'll get your maybe Fledgling Gryff back, right, and it's got +1/+1 or something else, or probably your 2/1 haste with armor. Getting that back would be pretty solid. Beginner's luck, right? Obviously, going to be better with being able to give your creatures armor, right? Because we're usually going to be, we'll have high power in this deck, but lower toughness.
Yeah.
My thought is that they both require you to make some deck building considerations that I don't know we want to be making.
So we're gonna want more creatures than
That's my
other
feeling.
things jamming up our deck, right?
That's my feeling. I think the more we can guarantee we're going 1-drop, 2-drop, or 2/1-drops, 3-drop, 4-drop, XYZ, I think the more we can guarantee that, I think the stronger the deck is. Or like the more consistent, I should say.
Right, I agree. I feel like Nahiri should be mostly creatures.
Yeah. Because
Just like Kaya. I mean, you don't have any real removals other than your cut downs, right?
Yeah. It plays very similarly because you really just want to make sure you're kind of going wide or going tall, whether through evasion or whatever else, and using that part of your card advantage. And I think the thing is, you've got your literal passive is like buff a creature. So it's almost like you always have a spell that you have access to for 1 mana that can make your creatures better than they already are. And that's kind of just another point, like you said, for why it's better to have a higher density of creatures than it would be spells, because it can really make your
Right.
draws awkward. And these are some interesting creatures to consider, and also the shields up, because I think I've definitely seen these in Nahiri in the past. But I would say recently when I'm playing, I haven't seen as much of them. But I'll throw it over to you, Matt. What are your thoughts on these cards that we're looking at?
I'm very, very partial to shields up, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And that's because, any creature will be saved by it, right? When you attack.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a necessity, but it is a good tool to have in your deck. And as far as, the rookie or the Caracal, I don't see them being viable in a Nahiri deck.
Yeah. I generally feel pretty similarly. Like, I don't think rookie makes as much sense with what we're doing, right? Like, making it into a 4-2 with our passive doesn't really do anything. Same with Caracal. Um, we're taking advantage of evasion. We're taking advantage of armor. And I do think shields up. If we were going to play a cheap spell that interacts with our creatures, I do think that shields up, out of the couple ones that we've looked at, makes the most sense. So I feel good about throwing it in and then seeing how we feel about our kind of spell to creature ratio.
Yeah.
So yeah, onward and upward.
Heck yeah. All right. So, I mean, bombastic boost can be good, but I don't feel like we really need that. Actually, out of all of these cards, I feel like if we were to put any of them in, there's two cards that really stand out. The two-headed Hellhound, because he deals double damage.
Yep.
If you buff him up to, 4 or 5 or even 6, now he's doing double that damage, even though he only has 2 health. But if he gets through and they don't think of that, that can be devastating. And you're also thinking of, like, you don't have to buff him up as much for the indomitable strength either for it to go off, because if he's only at a 3-2, you're doing 6 damage. I don't know if that would trigger it or not.
So,
thinking about that right now.
I actually had the same exact thought process, and it does not trigger because it has to have 5 total power when it attacks. But
Gotcha.
But again, between there's a way to do that, right? Where you have played Willful Smith, and you've got your Axe of Vengeance. That's +4 total. So you can get your Hellhound to be attacking as a 5-2, which deals 5 damage, and then if it were to connect, it would deal 10. And I definitely agree. I think Hellhound just has this really crazy upside, even though it's attacking on the ground. Sort of like when we were talking about Vanguard, right? Of like, yes, it doesn't have evasion, but the potential for it, even just the floor. I play it on turn 1. Turn 2, I give it a sword, and it attacks for 6 on turn 2. Is definitely noteworthy. So
It is.
I'm pretty partial to Hellhound myself. I haven't gotten to play that much in this deck, but I have to imagine it's pretty synergistic with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I agree. So let's put it in.
Heck yeah. What was the other card you wanted to talk about here?
Fling.
Hmm.
The only reason is it deals 3 damage to an enemy. So that means if they're down to 3 health, you get Fling, you can throw one of your creatures at him and game over. But I mean, it's not a necessity. I was just saying, as out of these 6 cards, those 2 cards would be the only 2 that I would consider.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing it up because even when we are talking about, like, trying to build the best version or whatever, it's good to be considering other cards that maybe, like, don't jump out at someone or don't, like, signal, oh, this is an auto include. But sometimes we're looking at these other options, it could be true that maybe you're playing against a bunch of green mid range and you're like, I'm having trouble reaching and closing out the game. What does Fling do? It turns one of my creatures that can't push through any damage to be able to deal damage to their face. So I appreciate you kind of expanding on that. I think, like we said, we can always come back and look at our, like, how many slots we would devote to spells. But I appreciate you bringing that up because I think I was not looking at that card. I was actually thinking about Pyromancer as, like, oh, I guess that could be good too. So it was nice to hear your process with that.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree Pyromancer could be good, but we don't necessarily need to stop them from healing.
Yeah, it doesn't do enough, right? It's a 1-mana 2/2, but, like, we were already not too excited about that to begin with.
If you're running Trastophobia or whatever it's called,
oh,
that's a very good card to have.
That's funny. I didn't even catch that interaction. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you got them at 13, you play that card, then you throw that down. They can't do anything about it. They're automatically going to lose unless they kill you before that.
Huh. That's kind of funny.
Because they can't heal, right?
Yeah. There's no way to change their life total with that.
Unless they have Carthofed.
Oh, true. They would deal damage to themselves with that.
Yeah, because if they have that, then it's going to do 4 damage. Or, they could even have that 2-drop 4/4 that I'm really not. Oh, Detonator that I'm not crazy about. But
yeah.
If you play him down and you have a way to kill him, now you've done 4 damage to yourself. You've saved yourself from that card.
Mm-hmm.
So that card stops you from healing, but it doesn't stop you from hurting yourself.
Right. That is true. That's interesting. I did lose to a Triskaidekaphobia Anrath build that just, I don't know if it had it as a one of, but they got me to 13 and I was like, all right, I can't lower or gain my life total. So
I did play against or actually no, I didn't play against it. A guy in my guild, I was watching him play and he got paired up against Jay from the developers.
Oh yeah,
of Spellslingers.
Mm-hmm.
And he got him down to 13 and played Trastophobia and he lost.
It's such
a Chandra deck.
Such a funny card. I mean, what a powerful thing. That's just hard to kind of control for, but
it was very interesting.
Well, as we're talking here, I'm kind of reflecting on. So we're 15 out of 30 cards. So we're halfway through, and I'm looking at. Okay, we've got technically, if we include X, we've got 5, kind of one drops, so to speak, that we can play on turn 1. Obviously, we can play Dawn if we have a creature, or like if we were going second. We've got some removal. We've got a little bit of interaction. So it's interesting. I'm just kind of like thinking about that. And there is a card here that until I was kind of recently exposed to it, I probably would not have thought about it. But is there anything with these 6 that stands out for you, Matt?
The biggest thing that stands out is Burn Through, right? It gives that creature can't block. And it also takes out someone with 1 health. But I'm going to guess you're looking at Sundancer.
Oh, man.
Because she's a 4/3 when she flips.
That is true. And it's interesting because I do think those are the two cards that like I've played with. One Burn Through with Ral when I was playing that a lot, and Sundancer obviously with Domri. But actually, your eye getting drawn to Burn Through, I agree with you. I actually think it does quite a lot of work in this sort of deck. I mean, just even thinking about allowing your Hellhound through, allowing your Willful Smith through, or some of these other creatures, it just for 1 mana to take away a toughness of a creature and open up an attack that normally wouldn't be there. I actually do think that it's doing enough work for 1 mana. And Sundancer, I do like. I'm not sure if it's an auto include here, but I do.
Oh, it's
I
it's
do
definitely
like it.
not, but it is something that you can, think about at least.
Yeah, yeah. I think the obviously the only drawback we look at it right is that we're likely trying to tap out most turns because we're just trying to apply pressure and all of that. But I've actually seen like bigger Chandra decks, like ones that have less of a low curve, play Sundancer, um, and like flip it later on or something like that. And like I thought that was an interesting angle. And I will shout out Shock here because I do think that Shock in obviously an aggressive meta can be really powerful. I think Burn Through is basically just a strictly better version for what we want to do. Um,
Right.
so
Shock's very powerful, but
yeah,
I wouldn't say we need it in this deck.
I completely agree. Yeah,
For
and
what we're trying to do, I wouldn't.
yeah, because also if we're thinking about what Shock is good against, which is aggro, I think when we're playing cards with armor and when we're doing a lot of damage, when we're removing their blockers, like, do we really need another slot devoted to a spell when we're already, again, trying to have, like, a pretty dense deck of creatures already? Um, and
If we weren't running out of room in our deck, then
we probably
I
wouldn't,
would
yeah.
consider it. But
Yeah. Wow, so
we're more
we've
than
got
halfway.
two one drop creatures left here to consider, and I gotta be honest, I'm not too good at stats. I took it in college, and then again in grad school. But like I think when I think about most low curve aggro decks, I would say that most of the time you probably want 8 1 drops, or at least I would say 6. What do you think about Lemur and Goblin for this deck?
Well, I I don't really like Lemur, and that's because he's got can't block. He's good. Um, he's good stats wise, yes, but the can't block, not really. I I don't know. It. If I was gonna do a can't block, I'd rather him be in the air.
You think Mama's calling and she's like, "Don't put Pouncing Lemur in your deck. Don't do it." um,
Well,
yeah, I'm not. I'm so I think about like Vanguard, right? And you're like, okay, Vanguard's a 3/1 for one, but it can block, and then we've got a 3/2 for one that can't block, and I think they are pretty close because it's like both creatures are usually going to trade 1 for 1. So I guess it's really thinking about okay, I guess what I am I worried about X1s blocking my Vanguard where my pouncing lemur could get through. Um, I I think with aggressive decks you're not so concerned about blocking, but obviously having the option to is important. Um, like just obviously it's a kind of a strict upside to say okay, I have to adjust in this damage race, or I have to deal with a threat, right, like a Colonian Tusker for example. I want to be able to block that. um, so I think I generally agree with you. I think I kind of like Vanguard better than this card at the moment.
Yeah, because you've got the option to block with
Yeah,
Vanguard, at least.
right. I think it's context, right? And I think if the context is I'm playing against a bunch of Domre, or I'm playing against a bunch of green decks that are playing their Channeler, that's a 1 mana 3/3, or their Colonial Tusker, that's a 2 mana 4/3. I'm gonna want to have the. I would like to have the option to block that. It's not all
Right.
the time, but I would like to have that option. So I think I agree with you. I think if we're gonna run one of those cards, I think it probably makes more sense to run Vanguard.
So let's go back and add Vanguard.
Throw Vanguard in. Yeah. What do you think about Goblin while we're doing that?
Goblin, I like him a lot. I do, because he's got the haste. He is,
Yeah, that's the key word there. I think.
yeah, he's a 1-drop haste with 2/1. The only card with haste that's better than him is her signature.
Yep. Yeah, I think
as far as 1-drops go.
right, right. And I think this is giving us enough bang for our buck here with the fact that it is a haste creature. It's 2 power, so again, it's not hard for this to come down in a later turn, right? And you give it the sword, you give it +1/+0 from the Axe of Vengeance, and this creature is going to have 5 power. You get to connect with Indomitable Strength, at worst, even if it doesn't connect. And when it does come down early, sometimes it can chip away at your opponent's life total, or often I just find you like suited up with a sword, it becomes a 4/1, and then they're looking at it with like their 3/3 or their 4/3, and they're like, I just have to block this because it's just going to attack me for 4, and then they get to block. And haste, I think in a deck that is just trying to push damage, haste is just like one of the better keywords aside from like flying, right, or some sort of evasion. So I'm
Right.
with you. I think when I look at our 1-drop package here, I'm pretty happy with it. And
Oh, yeah, I
now
agree.
we're already at 21 cards, which is wild because we have a bunch of 1-drops, some 2-drops, and a 3-drop. But I do
Right.
think that I think we talked about this, Matt, too, right? Like I definitely love building decks where like your land doesn't disrupt your curve. So when it's coming out on turn 5, potentially, like that's the earliest it can come down. Um, my thinking already is like, all right, do we even need 5 drops in this deck? Um, we probably will be topping out at 4 is kind of what I'm already thinking about. But I'm skipping a little bit ahead here, so let's get into these 2 drops because I think there's probably plenty to talk about here.
All right. Um,
You know me, I just get too excited. That's the problem.
oh, it's all good, man. It's all good. I'm very excited for it too. Um, I don't see any need to have in here
Nope.
that specter. That specter putting the traps. Traps are nice, but it's gonna affect what we want our deck to do. Flying is good too, but we can find a better 2-drop flyer.
Yeah, I think we had a pretty similar assessment for Kaya, right? It's like kind of jamming up your deck with like maybe things you don't want. If the card were to be buffed where it just gave you like 1 trap in your hand as a 2/1 flyer, like I feel like that would be very very good, right? Because you're just strictly getting a 2-for-1 that you don't have to worry about messing up your
Oh, yeah.
deck list, so to speak. But I totally agree. I don't think there's anything in this first set of creatures that we're really excited about.
Yep. So here is a nice one, and I believe you agree with me. Having a 2-drop flyer with 1 and 3 is pretty awesome, especially when you can equip him with more attack power. And he's with having 3 health, he can block some some twos for you, so you don't lose as much health.
Good old Silver Griffin. Yeah, I think that he definitely has a pretty clear synergy with both Kaya and Nahiri. I think my instinct is like I definitely want to try it, like or I want to at least see what the deck list looks like with it, because it does a lot of work, which like we've talked about, other folks might not really realize, like the fact that it has 3 toughness, and that obviously it's easy to buff it with the sword. It becomes a 3/3, and the fact, like you said, it can block something that has 2 power. It really does a lot more work on as this than the stat kind of line suggests. So I'm down to kind of see if that works out for us. So
Anything else you see in these 6? Nothing really stands out to me.
nope, weapon rank is a little bit too expensive, and healer is not really what we. Although healer is a really efficient body, it's just like we don't really care about gaining life. So
Right. um, I don't see anything really jumps out at me. I mean,
nope.
Dog Pack puts out 2 dogs, but they're not. I don't think it's really something for this deck.
Yeah, I think Dog Pack just is like seared into my mind as a Gideon card.
Pretty much.
I mean, it's not, I guess technically you're paying 2 mana to get 2 1/1s. The next turn you can make one of them into a 3/1. But, yeah, it's definitely not, it's a little bit below rate, I think, for what we want out of a 2-drop.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're good on those.
Yeah, no other spells here are making the list, I don't think. Okay. So Sun Empire Brawler, I really go back and forth on with the, like, do I want this in my Gideon deck? Do I want this in my, like, Nahiri deck? I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
So my thoughts are she's really good if you can protect her for long enough for her to buff herself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, once you've attacked with her twice, now she's got 3 health and she's at 6. But you need her in a deck that you can either buff her with another creature to make her so that she's not going to die right off, or be able to save her with a card. And I don't think we have enough to do that with her. She's going to be a big target.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this card needs a little bit more help to kind of live up to its potential, so to speak. And I don't know. We were already discussing the merits of a 3/1 for 1, right? And like this basically reads as a 4/2 for 2 if it gets to attack. But yeah, I'm not super excited to play this card. Is kind of my take.
Yeah. So anything in here stand out?
Nothing else. Yeah, we're not really worried about any of those other. Those spells don't really add enough. Good old Devoted Steed, though, is an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, he could work. He
Yeah.
definitely could work.
I think that's exactly what I would say. He could work. Do we want him, to be in the deck is a little harder to say.
Right.
But I do think that typically Devoted Steed has like a nice kind of niche in aggressive decks. It's a 2/2 for 2, and then you get to buff, the creature that you want to buff, which obviously can contribute to Barbarian Class overall. But yeah, I that's exactly my reaction. I'm not excited to be playing it.
Right.
But,
So, I love Yak. but not in
I
this
feel
deck.
like everyone loves Yak. It's such a fun card, but yeah, it just doesn't, like, unless you're building your deck around it, it just really doesn't work. So,
So this guy isn't bad, but I don't think he's something we want.
yeah, I feel like there was a time where like Shieldsmith could be helpful in aggro decks, but I feel like we have too many powerful creatures now, or like I feel like since Innistrad or whatever like was released, I feel like we've just gotten so many other toys to play with
Yeah.
that are stronger than a 2/2 that like minorly buffs another creature.
I'm thinking of a Johnny when I'm looking at that card anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like there's a lot more synergy there. Okay, so yes,
Iguana.
yeah, yeah. Let's talk about Iguana. Tell me.
He got trample, and he is already at 4. I
Yep.
like him.
I
He's
think
only 2 drop.
right. I think like exactly what we were looking at for Sun Brawler or whatever it's called, um, where you're like, okay, this is a 2 mana 3/1, but like it attacks as a 4/2 next turn, but it doesn't have any keywords, right? It's just like it's buffing itself. But for Iguana, I agree. I mean, like when we think about burn through and we think about potentially even armor up, right? Like this card just can do
Yep.
quite a lot of damage for us without paying much to do it. So
I agree.
I'm in on Iguana.
Yeah,
Also, I love that you have the foil versions. This makes this deck feel so much cooler. So
Oh yeah, I went through and I did get foil cards when I could try to bling out all my decks and building new decks. I'd rather put the foil card in than the regular card.
oh, I gotta do that sometime. I think I do have essence to do that, but I just haven't quite like landed on something. But yeah, the foil yak eating the grass.
Look at that,
It's
eating the grass. Love it.
pretty amazing. So well, yeah. So I love Iguana. Did we want to talk about Devil?
Um,
I'm not in on it, Matt, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to also weigh in on that.
can't block, right? He can't block. He's not hasty. Yes, he's got a finale, and yes, he can do damage. But for this deck, no.
Yeah, it's just
You gotta build a deck around Gutfire to make him work.
right, right. I definitely I agree with all of that, and I think again we're talking about rates on cards, right? We're looking at Overgrown Iguana, and we're like, oh my god, we get our 4/2 trample for 2, and then you look at Gutfire Devil, and you're like, okay, it's 2 mana for 2/1. Okay, it can't block. I guess when it dies, if they want to block it, it does a damage, and then I'm gonna get more of it in my deck, but like. I kind of want to draw my haste creatures. I kind of want to draw my other creatures. So
Yeah.
it just it doesn't make
Like
sense.
we talked about before,
Yeah,
it's gonna start bogging down your cards, and you're just gonna be getting can't block creatures for 2
enough said.
when you've got this guy
Yeah,
who only costs 1 and he's fast.
very good point. I feel like this is really helpful to kind of have these sorts of discussions, especially for people like who are not playing card games all the time, or haven't played Magic the Gathering for 16 years like myself. And I know Matt, for you've played like a bunch of other CCGs, so it's like not everyone is really kind of keying in on okay, why is this card better?
Right.
So I really like that we're able to have that kind of discussion, and a friendly mention to Frontline Paladin here, right? I mean, sure, you get a 2 mana 1/3 armor. You could slap a sword on it, becomes a 3/3 armor, but it's again just a little bit below rate of how much aggression we can really pack into the deck. Yep. Thank you for highlighting the
Right
card that
there.
is strictly better.
Better
for us.
card. He's in the air, okay?
Yep.
The armor's gonna go away after 1 turn.
Everybody take notes on this, please, because we'll have a quiz at some point.
And then Alarm Bell would be good for drawing creatures, but we have low cost creatures. We don't need it.
I think Alarm Bell was a real consideration and a real player when it said draft, and you could choose what 2 or 1 drop that you wanted. I think it did get considerably less effective when it only said just draw. And I agree with you. It just, I don't, again, we want to be making consideration of how many creatures we have in our deck. So.
Right now, we're down to 5 more cards.
Whew, okay. My goodness. All right.
So, this card is alright. Especially where he's doing 1 damage before he fights. So that's a consideration. This card's a consideration because now you're just buffing the power up.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, what jumps out at me immediately is Sword Cannoneer, because I do think in these style decks you can get a lot of mileage out of a 2/2 that gives something +2/+0. It's kind of like if you think about Steed, right? They're kind of filling the same slot, but Cannoneer is buffing your power, which is a little bit more important than what Steed's doing. Is kind of how I feel.
So let's put him in there. Let's do it.
Thank you. And 2-Hit Wonder, I played against the card a couple times, and like sometimes it is kind of annoying to play around. But I agree with kind of your initial take, Matt. It's like it's all right. You're like, yeah, it's right. Serviceable. If you for whatever reason don't have these other 2 drops, like sure you could play 2-Hit Wonder and it would be pretty good into some of the aggro decks, but it's not exciting, I think.
I think the mindset with it is even if you block someone that's got 3 health, you can kill him with a 2 power. Or even if you're blocking this guy coming at you.
Yeah.
Now you're taking no damage and he's dead automatically.
Yeah. No, I mean.
So it is viable, but we don't have the room, right?
I don't think we do, but I will say, if we ever get to a meta where, like Gideon potentially, or some of these other aggressive decks, or even like maybe even Kaya, although it's not as effective because they're going to be evasive. 2-Hit Wonder could show up, could go up. I think for me, if the meta really really shifted to hyper aggressive, but I don't think it's good enough. I think the card might actually even need like a buff, like being a 3/3 for 2 that has that effect could be interesting. But as a 2/3 for 2, yep. I don't think it quite does enough.
No, we're on the same page. So, one card that I think is interesting is Blundering Brawler in this. Okay. But the only thing about that is he's very random when he throws his 3 damage at things.
Yeah.
So he can definitely take out some things you don't want.
Yeah.
Or even, hurt your health. He can hurt you when you don't want it to.
I'm glad we're talking about this card, because I think, like, there was a time where I was testing Brawler and, like, Fling and, like, sort of a Chandra version that was really just, like, okay, I'm going to not play maybe, like, a 1-drop creature or a 2 or 3 drop that could die to my Brawler. I'm just going to play it and hopefully, like, hit your face and kind of trade damage that way. I think it is pretty awkward in this kind of deck, so I definitely agree with you. But I do want to stop us here for a second, because there is a card here that I feel like might be worth discussing, although I don't know if we have the slots for it, which is yes, thank you. um, I,
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I looked. It's +3 and trample.
yes, yes. So we've been
It can be. We can, but if we were to, we should only put 1 in.
okay. Tell me why you feel like 1 is kind of the appropriate number.
Well, because you're not always going to need it. And we're down to only 3 cards left.
That's fair. Yeah, I think I'm fine with 1 of this card. Part of me is like, would 2 be good? I'm definitely not sure. I think one of the biggest selling points for Untamed Rage in this deck is how it specifically synergizes with Hellhound. Because it's so easy for Hellhound to get massive. Like, even just with this card, right? It gets 4 power when it attacks, and then it's trampling over for 8 total damage, at that creature, and then the rest tramples over. So I do think that can just randomly win a game. But yeah, there's a real cost to putting a 2-cost trap in your deck. 2 mana is quite a lot when we think about cheaper aggressive decks, but I think it would be interesting to maybe try at least 1.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's at least like 1 or 2 cards that I'm thinking about for this deck. So now I'm like, oh, maybe we don't have room for it. But I kind of like 1. I don't know.
All right, so we've got 28 cards out of 30, right?
Yeah, we sure do.
So let's
keep it moving and come back to it.
Well, I was gonna say, I know you like to have a lot of 1-drop creatures, but I feel like we could afford getting rid of 1 or 2 1-drop creatures for a couple more expensive creatures.
Okay, I'm open to that. I guess probably the first one we'd be thinking of is Vanguard.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay.
Let's take her out.
And then...
Because I feel like there's a couple later on that we should get in this deck. So, I'm not sure what you're thinking of, other than maybe this card.
Oh, geez. Regathian Firecat. I guess when this thing connects, it's pretty terrifying. But so the only other 2-drop, I'll go, for the throat here. I think that I was thinking about was Shortcutter, Goblin Shortcutter.
Yep.
I think having Burn Through and that can be really, really hard to play around. I think that is probably we're looking, it is the last 2-drop we can really consider. Scalper Stand was something I feel like I did see in these decks at some point, but I just think it's way too clunky and kind of awkward. But Shortcutter, I do think, is worth a slot in here, even if we have to move some stuff around.
Right. So if you think about it, right, this card right here would be better to put in than Vanguard.
For 2 mana as a 5/1.
It costs 1 more, but it's already set up for your Indomitable Strength.
I guess that is true. I haven't really considered that. Even though the difference between 1 and 2 in a deck like this is like pretty big, right? Because you do want to have the ability to maybe go triple 1-drop by turn 2. Like, obviously that's a specific draw in the game, but yeah, you are right about that, Matt. That is an interesting point for Indomitable Strength. It just literally is 5 power. So I don't know. Maybe we circle back to that at some point.
It's not a necessity, but I think I think I'm gonna just skip to what I'm thinking of.
Please do, because I know we're coming toward the end, and I'm interested to. I feel like these last couple slots are the hardest, honestly.
It is, yeah. No. Where is he at? I know he's red, and I believe he is a 4 cost.
Goblin Field Rusher. Okay.
So I've seen this played in Chandra decks.
Yeah.
And it can be devastating because you're paying 4, but you're also getting 2 creatures with haste in one go.
Yeah. Yeah. I can definitely see the merit. I guess my counter offer here would be, why not play Sky Knight Legionnaire instead over that?
All right, what's the cost?
3 for Sky Knight.
And color?
It's red white. Oh, you just got past it. Go down a little bit more.
Oh.
Yep, there it is. Can I try and sell you on this card real quick?
You don't have to.
Okay.
I forgot about the card.
Yeah.
You don't have to. It's a flying, it's a haste, it's a 3-drop, it's a 2/2. Like, everything about it just goes synergy with the deck. I completely agree.
I'll be real though, Matt. I'm glad. Like, I wanted to hear like what your gut was saying there, because I do think there's another creature that I think we'll mention here. I don't know if it's going to make it, but I think the reason I was on the fence about Legionnaire is I was like, is it good enough rate? Right? It's 3 mana for a 2/2. Yes, it is flying. Yes, it is haste. But like, how does it fit into the deck? And for me, when I played against Nahiri, basically what would happen is, you're trying to fight for board position. You're trying to like soak up as much damage and keep your life total high. But like, a lot of times, unless you have specific cards, Sky Knight Legionnaire comes down. You're gonna get the Indomitable Will pretty easily with just whether it's just Will Smith plus the equip, or the equip plus Axe of Vengeance. But this is the card that I think can so easily deal 10 to your opponent with Indomitable Strength, because of the fact that it's flying and haste, and it's sometimes like the most thank you. It's like the most just I don't know, this card I feel like closes out your games like half of the time.
Oh yeah, it definitely can.
Yeah, so
I was pretty devastated against it. Or it was pretty devastating going against it, rather.
Yeah, it just, that combination of flying and haste, like, you're just, when you're playing with even Breakthrough, right, or Burn Through, or Goblin Shortcutter too, like, even, you can even, like, play it on turn 5, turn 6, you make their reach creature not be able to block or something like that. I think Legionnaire does do enough work in this deck. And the only other card I would be thinking about, but again, I'm not exactly sure what we would be taking out here, would be Blitzing Minotaur.
Yeah, I stopped. You saw me stop?
I did see you stop. So
that's a 3
let's pull up and talk about Blitzing Minotaur for a second. He got the buff this patch, so do we feel like that is enough? Does this thing fit into our plan?
It does. It really does. I would personally like to make room for it. If it was still a 3/3, I wouldn't be considering it, but it's a 4/3 with haste. And it's just something that I think all aggro decks that are red should be running.
You sold me. I agree. I mean, even just with Minotaur plus Axe of Vengeance, that's 5 power. right? It's got the synergy immediately there with our class card, and I you know what, you saved me a little bit from myself earlier. I think, Matt, I get really stuck on curve, and I think it's really important. And I like that you highlight, like, I know you think you want this many one drops, but like maybe you should consider the fact that you might not need that many. Like, it'll be good for your curve when you have it, but like you're not going to be too happy on turn three drawing a one drop when you could be drawing a Blitzing Minotaur. Um,
Right.
so I think it should be in the deck. So as I mean, I feel like pretty good adding that, and then I don't know, maybe seeing if we want to wrap up here. But what would you replace here?
Um,
This is where you gotta you know put on the pants and the boots and kind of wade in and say, all right, how do I
I'm
get this done?
I'm gonna say it's a big risk because I really am partial to this card, but suits up. I say we get rid of that. That way we're not getting rid of our creatures, our one drops. And
Mm.
the rest of the creatures really it goes well with the deck. And suits up is basically like a backup plan, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, suits up can be, especially when your opponents are not expecting it, right? Like, traps always lose value when your opponent's like, oh, like, they're playing that deck. I'm pretty sure they're going to be playing this trap. They definitely lose value when people know how to play around them, but when your opponents don't, they can be incredibly strong. But I agree with you. I think we're going to be playing this deck, and we're going to be much happier on average to draw a Blitzing Minotaur instead of a Suits Up. Is kind of how I would be thinking about it. Um,
Yeah, so let's do that, and then we'll wrap this up because I feel like
Sweet.
this deck is pretty solid.
I agree. I mean, this is how I really like to build aggro decks myself, and I think you're a very experienced Kaya player, and I feel like there's a lot of transferable skills to kind of how this deck looks. It's definitely got a little bit of a different thing where you're not sequencing to complete your missions, but you are sequencing in certain things at different times to like really get the most out of your class card and really get the most damage possible. So I feel pretty good about how this looks.
I do, and I feel like this experience is very fun, and I mean, you're teaching me stuff too. Like, not, I know I've played a lot of CCGs, but it's always good to hear from an outside source.
Likewise, I think that this was really fun, and like I'm interested to hear if other folks think that, whether it's like working on other decks or even just discussing like different stuff around deck building, because that is a big part of this game. 100%. Like, it's not just about making the right lines of play. You really do have to consider quite a lot of cards, as we did, right? Where we're like, oh man, I want this, I want that. We're running out of slots. Like, does it make sense to play this card over that card? So, I hope that this be able to, show folks this process of just having two folks put their heads together and like, share what kind of stands out, what your gut says. That it can be helpful for other people too. So I appreciate you, Karma, aka Matt, being willing to do this kind of video, and I'm also excited to play with it when we can get that done.
Yeah, I can't wait to try it out and see what this really can do.
Sweet, man. Well, we're gonna catch you soon for these games, and thanks again for working on this, and we can definitely figure this out with our schedules in the future if other folks would like us to kind of go through this process with other decks. So other than that, I think we did you have any closing thoughts? before I before I sign us off?
I really enjoy it. I really enjoy, having the conversations about which cards to play and why.
Oh, you got it. You
It's
got to
been
name the deck too, Karma, because
I do
like
have I do.
you always have good deck names, and I have really boring deck names. So I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's all good. Um, hmm. What would what would this deck name be?
I I don't know. Like something with maybe barbarian or I don't know. I'm the worst at this
How
kind of
about how
stuff.
about how about barbaric beatdown?
Ooh, I like the alliteration. Yes, barbaric beatdown with LongTim and Karma. Maybe that's what I'll throw out for the video title. I like that.
There it is.
There we have it. Well, this was awesome, and I appreciate folks tuning in, and I hope that this is something that is interesting, and we can keep doing it in the future. Because, like Matt was saying here, it really is a lot of fun to kind of have these conversations and work on this stuff together. So, yeah, we'll catch you all next time.
Take care, guys.